Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters.
Greetings, Cretans.
John. Good to see you again. You're looking,
you too, my friend.
You're looking quite good.
Thank you.
Apparently, isolation helps you.
Yes. I'm here, isolated at about 9,000 feet over the Great Lakes, as you can see from the window. But
how are your parents doing? There was a lot of flooding up where they're at.
Yeah, that was the strangest thing. What day was that? It was Wednesday evening, and out of the blue, my sister texted me. It's like the dam is broke. Our parents have to evacuate, and my parents are they're 85 and 95 years old. I mean, evacuating quickly isn't easy, but fortunately. There was a neighbor or a friend from the church took them in on the other side of town away from the evacuation zone. And the way that the dams broke, two of them broke, and the way the river flooded, it's probably not going to reach their house. So, but I want to give a big shout out to all the Michigan brewers around Edenville and Midland County. Really feel for you, and hope you're able to recover everything in your houses, because it's some of the most devastating flooding I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's a real shame. Yeah, I can't imagine what it's like to have to be through that, along with the coronavirus and everything else that's been going on.
What a crazy year.
Yeah. It's been adding up. Well, and speaking of crazy, or
yes,
our good friend John Blickman.
Indeed, he
is a wild and crazy guy.
That's right.
I think of all the people I know in brewing, he is one of the. He is truly a character, and in part because he's such a smart guy. He's very clever and funny to be around, and he makes great brewing equipment. He uses that giant brain of his for the good of all brewers instead of for evil, and so you can trust him to really turn out some great stuff. And he's been supporting this program forever, pretty much since the beginning, and he pays for it so you guys don't have to. So I would appreciate if you could go to blickmanengineering.com, check out all the great stuff they have there, and then possibly send them an email. Send an email to feedback@blickmanengineering.com and just say, hey, thanks for supporting the program. I like listening to it. These guys are interesting, funny, whatever. Thanks for doing it. So if you could do that, we would appreciate it greatly.
Yep.
Today, through the kindness of their hearts, the Cane Island Ailers have invited us to kind of join their homebrew meeting and do a little presentation here. And it was Matt Harold that actually asked. He said, could you do some talking about brewing for competition and what hints you might have for that, because that is one of the things I did. But the Cane Island Ailers, they're no slouches as far as it comes to competition.
How non-slouching are they?
They in 2019 did quite a bit. The runner-up for the Lone Star Circuit Club of the Year. Justin and Matt did quite well as well, and then 3 pro-ams, 5 best of show beers and meads, 159 medals over the course of 2019, which is 67 gold, 57 silver, 37 bronze. That's a substantial number of medals in there.
Indeed.
And Justin and Matt seem like they really are cranking out some fine beers to be the brewer of the year, the agent of the year. So I think, I'm not sure that they need our tips. I think they may have all that they need already in house. But like anybody, I think you take a great athlete, and they're always interested in learning some new tricks. That's right. Or hearing what everybody else is doing, watching tape on somebody else, just to see if there might be one last little thing they can get to push them over the top to always win the championship. So, kudos to them for setting this up. I'll tell you what we're going to do. Why don't we take a short break? And when we come back, we'll get into some of Matt's questions and some of our answers. We'll be back right after this.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on 2 gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller, and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at BlickmanEngineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're talking with the Cane Island Ailers. We're actually part of their meeting today, and we're talking about how you might improve your chances in competition. So one of the first questions posed was, what differs between brewing for yourself versus brewing for competition? I look at it this way. Brewing for yourself, you're the only person you need to impress is yourself. You're the only person that needs to be happy. Sometimes, you're sharing it with, your loved ones or your neighbors or something like that, and you want them to be happy too. But that's different than brewing for competition, because your neighbors, your family, they're not going to tell you how much your beer sucks. Well, maybe they do. Maybe they'll tell you your beer sucks all the time because they're jealous or something like that. But so you can't really trust what those people are saying, and you shouldn't really worry about what they're saying anyways. If you like it, that's all that matters. Just be happy with your beer, brew the best beer that you like and that you enjoy. And that's, what brewing for yourself is all about. Brewing for competition, you're really trying to impress. If you're trying to win, you're really trying to impress someone else. You're trying to make someone else think it's the greatest beer in the world. And that person doesn't know who you are, doesn't have any idea, who brewed it. And that's, the important thing. You need to make sure that they are, just blown away by your beer without knowing you. So that's kind of the difference between brewing for yourself versus brewing for competition. And brewing for competition can be a joy, but it also, if that's all you do, it can kind of suck the life out of you.
Well, I think it has to be done with a certain amount of calculation. I mean, beer competitions are like dog competitions. You've got to enter the right dog. You got to enter the right category with your beer. I've judged so many competitions where you get a outstanding beer, but it's in the wrong category, and sometimes it's a pale ale in an IPA category or vice versa, or sometimes strangely it can be a Hefeweizen in the English bitter category. It's like, how did that get here? But when you brew a beer for competition, pay very close attention to the category that you intend to enter it in. I mean, I know a lot of people may brew something, think it's really good, and think, okay, what category can I enter this in? It's probably not going to do well if it doesn't fit the category squarely.
Yep. Good points. Let's see. Strategy for categories to enter. Okay. So, one of the things I've always advocated is ask other people what category they think it is. I hand you a beer and just say, John, taste this beer.
Yeah.
What beer do you think it is? And then, whatever category that person says, maybe that's, and if it's a different category than you thought you were entering, maybe that's, a bit of advice as to what panel to enter. So pre-screening is always a good idea. I like to do that. It has its limits, though, because it can steer you away from entering. It just depends on the quality of the people on your pre-screening panel. If they're good people or not. Right. Whether it'll sync up with the judges that you're trying to enter in. That it could be good, it could be bad. And one of the other things I've noticed over the years was there's a regional tilt to judging, where people in a certain area expect a beer to be a certain way, or they have a fondness for sweeter beers or more caramel. I noticed that especially in the Midwest when it came to things like pale ale, IPA. They wanted to see that caramel and that sweetness, whereas on the West Coast it was always a drier, crisper, lighter malt character. And so you had to tailor your beers for the region. And so, it's the same on your pre-screening panels. If you can get panels of people that are in the area where the judging is going to happen, that's helpful. It's like the nationals. You got to think when you're entering the NHC, where is the final going to be held? So some people, they will brew a beer for their local entry area for the first round, and then they may rebrew some of them for the second round for if it's in an area where your where the taste buds are maybe slightly different, or the profile of what people expect out of beer is slightly different. I mean, we try to make sure all the judges are judging to the same exact, style, but the fact is there's regional differences. So being able to do that can be real helpful.
Yeah. Matt Harold has a good question. He says, I've heard that you should always lean on the upper end of gravity and IBUs and ABV within the style. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I've said that in the past. I think for almost all styles, yes, that tends to be true, because with higher gravity, with higher, everything comes a bit more flavor and a bit more character.
Right.
A bit more character gives you a little bit of an edge, in a flight of 13 beers, the more flavorful beer is going to stick out and, give you a bit of an edge, I think.
Yeah. In general, I agree with that. And in general, I would encourage that, I guess, or I wouldn't discourage it as a strategy for winning competitions. However, if you take it too far, I know of plenty of instances when we're judging and we will, point that out, hey, this beer, it's a little big for style, or it's a little too bitter for style.
I point that out quite a bit myself.
Yeah. When you've got experienced judges that know a style well, that kind of thing will be called out, and they will lean on the more middle of the style, the better balanced beer, and I think best balance is the key. If you can bump up the gravity and the bitterness and the flavor a little bit, but still keep it all very well balanced, that beer will probably stick out, as the best.
Sure.
But if it's simply a higher alcohol or simply more bitter than the others in the flight, it'll probably get knocked down.
Well, and then it also brings up, other strategies: flooding, cross-category entering. Flooding a category, for example, this works really well when there are like 5 sub-styles in a category, right? This is how I always won like every medal in Scottish ales, is because I'd win, gold, silver, and bronze, because it was a category with like 5 styles to it or 4 styles to it. And so I'd enter one in each and, place in all of them. So the categories where there's more than 3 sub-styles, that works really well for that. And same for the competition as a whole. You miss all the shots you don't take. So it's the same thing here. If you don't enter a beer, you don't have a chance of winning a medal. So the more you can enter, the better. Of course, it has a cost. So that may not be something that's feasible, but it certainly helps your chances the more entries you have. As far as cross-category entering, entering, I guess, the same beer in other categories, this can help in some of those categories where the definition's a little wishy-washy or tends to overlap. But I would say, something, and people point out porters and stouts. What's the difference between a porter and a stout? Well, it's like they're 2 different things. But, something that makes a good porter doesn't necessarily make a good stout, and something that makes a good stout doesn't make a good porter. If you have a beer that really seems like it crosses between the 2, its chances of placing in one category or the other is probably pretty minimal. So you have to kind of watch for that. It's possible. There's other categories where that works. It generally tends to be where it's ill-defined categories, or categories that seem very loosely defined. So there tends to be a lot of maybe Belgians or things like that have that kind of opportunity, should we say. Which styles are the best for the cross-category entry? I would say, let's see here, what did I put in my notes? The Scottish categories, right? A lot of the English ones, like the stouts, where it's, again, like John was saying, if you have really good judges, they're going to know the difference between, a sweet stout, a dry stout, an oatmeal stout, foreign extra. The differences are kind of obvious, but they're still pretty close together, and I could see, something like that. And like I said before, the Belgian ales tend to have, what's the difference between a triple and a golden strong?
Right.
A lot of times people will miss that as judges, or, there's almost some crossover in some of the categories. And I think that there is an opportunity to kind of either, flood a category or, cross over into other styles.
Yep.
What do you do with all this beer once you stock up for a competition year? Wow. And how best to store it if you don't have a cellar? I mean, that's, one, you want to keep it cold. You want to keep it in the dark. You want to keep it, well maintained. I think, back in the day, I took a storage shed that I had. I lined it with insulation. I took an air conditioning unit and fiddled with it to make it, produce 34-degree air. And I built my own, walk-in. And that worked really well. I was able to store quite a lot of beer in there. And if you keep beer cold, if you package it right, low oxygen, it's clean, it's been fermented right, you package it well, you can leave it in there for a year in refrigeration, and it tastes, just as fresh as just about anything else anybody else is entering. Mm-hmm. So I was able to build up a lot of different styles that way. And one of the things, that you can do is brew all the beers that have a long shelf life to them, that people may be tasting. Their familiarity with the style tends to be more aged examples. So a lot of Belgian beers, British beers here in the U.S., Belgian beers, British beers, German beers, we tend to get a lot of aged examples here. And so when we do, the judges are kind of calibrated to these aged examples. So those, there's beers that are much more durable. A lot of the lambics, a lot of the big Belgians, some of the lagers, things like that. You can, and especially if you can store them cold, you've got years that you can enter. You brew a great example of a barley wine, and oh my God, it's perfect. And you've got 5-10 gallons, and you bottle it all into competition bottles. You have I think I had a barley wine that I brewed, or a few barley wines that I brewed, and then I just bottled them all up. And then over the course of like 5 years or so, 7 years, I think I entered them every year. And I drink some of them, but it was pretty much a guaranteed win if you wanted to get points for something. So that's a pretty good strategy. So I would brew all those things first, and I'd brew them in volume. I'd set yourself up someplace to store them where they're cool and don't get sunlight, don't get disturbed, and then and have a consistent temperature, and then brew a bunch of that stuff, store that first, and then the lighter stuff, the stuff that needs to be fresh to do well in competition, things like IPAs, a lot of the lighter stuff, the smaller beers, those you brew fresh to land right at the competition time, and then enter all those in, mix in some of your stash of winners, and load up that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one addition there is if you don't have a cellar and you don't have a walk-in cooler, I think a chest freezer is probably the most economical choice of in terms of volume and so on and cost for long-term storage of beer. You can put a temperature controller on it and get it down to like that 34, 35 degrees where, beer will keep for a long time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when I first set up Heretic, we were sharing a building with a friend of mine, and there was no refrigerated storage whatsoever. So I took a section of the building, and I bought some foam board, some 2-inch foam board, and I put it together with tape across the opening of the section. I cut a door into it, and then I took a little window AC unit. Again, I put that in. I bypassed the. I think I took the thermostat out and reset it, or you also need to remove the freeze sensor. But I got it to produce cold air, and it's pretty cheap. So you could, if you can find a cheap little window AC unit, buy some foam board, throw it together. You doesn't even need structural. You just have a foam board on the bottom and just foam board all around. And then you can stack your beer in there and just have a cooling unit. Or maybe you duct something off from in your house. I don't know, some way get some cold air in there. Or I've seen people cut holes in like the wall of a kegerator and just put a fan on it and just blow some cool air in there and keep that. The colder you keep it, the better it's going to store. The longer it's going to store, the better chance you have. And it's very difficult to build up 20 or 30 entries for a competition. But, by doing that, you should be able to. Every 10 degrees C doubles the rate of staling. So, if you keep it nice and cold, cool refrigeration temperatures, it'll stay stable for a long time. All right. We need to take another short break. And when we get back, we'll continue with brewing for competition right after this.
Back to the two guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're enjoying some beers, talking about brewing competitions.
Yep.
And
Jamil, question came in from the chat.
Uh-huh.
What's the most number of entries you've put into one competition?
Gosh, I don't know. I would have to go back into the spreadsheets I used to keep. I think I had 20 something one time. I don't think I've done more than that. I think it's for the Nationals. I think it was second round of the Nationals. I had 20 something one year.
Dang. Yeah. Well, I remember there was a couple of years there when you won the Ninkasi that every other win was Jamil Zainashev.
Yeah, I got some big points.
Yeah, you did.
Well, and I don't remember which ones I won, but I remember the first Ninkasi I won at the Nationals was in Las Vegas. And it was thing I was talking about earlier where, if you have, if the judging's in your area, you've got a bit of an advantage of people from across the country because it's a judge pool that you've already, tested your mettle against. You've been entering beers in competitions that they've judged, for a long time. In that case, it was a lot of people from around the area, but I'm not saying people know your beers and somehow are, favoring you. It's just that we tend as judges to talk together, drink together, and discuss beers and examples and say, well, yeah, that's a good example. That's not a good example. So that can be an issue. So when you have that advantage, enter as much as you can because that's your chance, That's your chance to win. Let's see here. When should you pull a beer from competition? The first bad score sheet or third? I don't know if it's the score sheets that, you should rely on 100%. You need to kind of read between the lines on score sheets. Sometimes what I would do is, out of a set of like 3 score sheets, if 2 of them sound insane, just throw those 2 out, ignore those numbers, put a little red flag on those. You have to kind of get a sense. Sometimes it takes a few times entering a beer, and you get, like 10 sheets in your hand, you can see trends, and you can, look at the data that way. You can say, well, 7 out of 10 are saying that it's a little too dark. It's like, and it seems to be part of what's keeping it from meddling. So I better back off on the color, but, half of them are saying it's not roasty enough. It's like, okay, so I need to have the roasty flavor while reducing the color. It becomes like a little game of, what's valid data that you're getting and what is kind of, nonsense. And also, it's also based off of what you think about the beers. You have to kind of get a sense from yourself whether something's an award winner or not. Be honest with yourself. But you shouldn't, if you believe something is really well done and it's just being misunderstood, perhaps it's in the wrong category. Is it, this beer that you're going to pull, if it's really well brewed, maybe it's just not found the right category. If it's poorly brewed, well, then you should pull it. But if it's really well brewed and for some reason it's not scoring well or not placing, sometimes it's just, again, right day, right circumstances, or flight order. When you're doing IPAs, things like that, boy, if you're at the tail end, buried in the middle, you're not going to do really well.
Right.
So sometimes it's that. So you just have to kind of, play the numbers.
Yep. Yeah. When I'm judging, if I taste a beer that seems to, be out of category or fit another category better, I try to tell that to the brewer. Say it's really well brewed, but it's too big for style, or it would be fit better, in this category than this category. Again, trying to give that feedback so that they can, enter it in the right category, and rather than just pulling it. But if a beer's flawed, badly oxidized, contaminated, something weird going on, diastaticus, or various flaws that are obvious, then the score sheet should say so, and that's a red flag to pull it.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, you can have one or two judges that say, "Oh, yeah, this is contaminated and horrible," and they're just wrong, and it's fine. And you have to kind of, get a sense of that. But if you keep entering it and everybody says, "Yeah, this is contaminated," well, then that's your issue. So it's kind of, just based on numbers. All right, what can you do to set yourself apart at the judging table? We kind of talked about, higher gravity or something like that. But I think one of the things that people often fail to, and it shocks me that people fail to do, is put their beer in a new, clean bottle of the appropriate size and style. It's fine, in small competitions where, there isn't a lot of entries to reuse bottles. But I've seen, weird, bottles with a stopper and a rubber band and, bits of dirty label all over it on, in the nationals. And I'm like, why in the world, if you're, and the judges are told not to, focus on the bottle, the packaging. There is like a thing for, appropriate fill level and all that nonsense, but, it's supposed to have no score. But I tell you, it affects people's perception of what the beer is going to taste like. It shouldn't, but it does. They cannot dissociate themselves from one from the other. And so, you send in a bottle with a bunch of old labels stuck on it, and or some jelly jar, half full of beer. It's like, well, you're going to affect your chances of winning. Same goes for kind of the you also want to beyond that, you want to get the appropriate color, and head retention, carbonation. You want it to look good going into the glass. So when they first look at it, that affects the judges too. It's supposed to be a tiny bit of the score, but I can't tell you the number of times somebody thought a beer was too dark or too light, and so the whole beer tasted bad. It wasn't a style just because of that one thing. So you got to be careful about that as well. I think that's one of the things you really can do. Oh, John, I think you're muted or lost your connection there.
Let me check.
There you go.
Okay.
You're back.
Yeah, don't send in tiny bottles. I mean, I've been at several competitions where, you'll get this
in a thimbleful. Well,
or you'll get a little 6-ounce or 10-ounce bottle sent in, and sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's a little off, but it's hard to adequately judge a small bottle. People are getting tiny pours, and then you'll say, well, maybe sometimes there's a problem with that particular bottle. Did they send in, can we get another bottle, please? And they said, no, they only sent in 1 or they only sent in 2. My goodness, you've paid your money to enter this competition. Send in all 3 bottles. Make sure that they're standard size, because you may be selling yourself short.
Well, that's a good point too. I think if you're entering a competition, you should be entering something that you think is going to win. If you think you're going to win, well, then make sure you send in however many bottles they say, because there is a best of show round, right? And I can't tell you the number of best of show beers that really couldn't make it over the hump because they only sent in 1 bottle for a 2-bottle competition or a 3-bottle competition. And so the best of show judges are getting just like a couple of drops in each cup of warm, flat beer. It's like, sorry, you're not going to get best of show. So
Right.
you pretty much limited yourself there from winning. And the other thing is, if they're saying 12-ounce bottles or 12 to 14-ounce bottles, don't send in like a 64-ounce, milk jug of beer.
Yeah.
I've seen these giant bottles come in, and it's like, well, that's not necessarily a good thing either. If you're going to take the competition thing seriously, you need every last detail to be perfect. I used to, I remember for the Las Vegas NHC, I mean, I live up in Northern California, and that was in Las Vegas, and I bought an Igloo marine cooler, one of those giant, like 100-quart ones or 120-quart ones.
Yeah.
And I packed all because I had 20 some odd entries, and you need like 3 bottles, per. And so I put them all in, nice and tight. I taped that up. We had some ice packs, and I shipped the entire thing to Las Vegas. And I figured, well, when I'm in Las Vegas, I'm driving to Las Vegas, I'll pick it up and I'll, just drive it back with me home, and I've still got my nice cooler. Well, I got there, and it was Michael Ferguson. He was working at a casino down there, a brewery down there.
Yeah.
And all the entries were going there. And then I showed up to pick it up. He was like, oh, that was like the one thing I was going to keep. But I set my beer in a nice insulated chest, so it was cold when it got there. I asked the organizers later, I'm like, how was the beer when you got it? They go, oh, it's still like perfectly cold. Like it went, it was cold when we got it. It went into the cold storage cold. It's cold the whole time. And again, that gives you an edge on, how good your beer is going to be, and we think about it and go, well, it's not that important. Well, I'll ask you this. Which beer do you think is going to do better? A beer that is, an IPA that's 1 week old, IPA that's 4 weeks old. Is there going to be a difference? It's probably not a huge difference, if everything was done properly. But, side by side, which one are you going to prefer? It's a subtle difference, but people, a lot of people with some good palates can pick that stuff out and may prefer the one that's a little fresher, may prefer the one that's a little older. That's the problem. But that's, another one of those little key things that can really, really make a difference to people.
We've got some good questions here in the chat, Jamil.
All right. Well, and let's do this.
Okay.
We can. I can stop sharing here, and we can go back to the whole thing, the whole shebang.
Oh, okay. Very good.
All right. I'll say. All right. Questions, and people can unmute too if they want.
Yeah. James asks, thoughts on bottle conditioning versus forced carbonation or beer gun. Are the regular 12-ounce bottles capable of holding the pressures needed for the higher CO2 volumes of Belgian beers?
Ooh, good question. They max out kind of around the 3.5. It depends on how thick they are. They will handle it, but it's very delicate, and they will shatter with the slightest tap. So I wouldn't do it, but they'll hold a surprising amount of pressure.
But more fragile.
Yeah, you'll see some that are so thin that I wouldn't trust them to hold 2.5 volumes.
Yeah.
But the difference between 2.5, 3.5 volumes isn't that much. I mean, it is, but in terms of packaging, the packages are meant to hold, more than the 2.5 volumes that we normally charge a thin 12-ounce bottle to. They'll hold 3 for sure. But the higher it goes, the more risk you're taking. So you don't necessarily need to get the really heavy duty glass, but you can find 12-ounce bottles, and you'll see some are super thin and light, and some are quite thick. Just go for the thicker ones, and you should be pretty good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Matthew. Just a quick question about the small bottle discussion you all had. Does that really apply to beer, or what about mead? Because there's a lot of competitions where they'll allow small bottles for mead just because it's so expensive, and
Right.
I make small batches of mead. Does that rule? Do you think you gain an advantage by having a larger bottle of mead in a competition?
Well, I think it depends on, how many bottles they're asking for. If they're asking for one bottle and they have a best of show round and everything else, I'd go with the larger bottle size. I wouldn't go to a 750 mil, but, I'd go up to 12 ounces instead of 7 ounces.
Mm-hmm. Or 16, yeah.
Yeah, and then but if they're asking for 3 or 4 bottles, I think a 7 ounce is plenty appropriate, because you're assuming you're going to have 3 judges. A lot of times they only do 2 now, but it may be as many as 4. With 4 judges, they're still getting close to 2 ounces apiece. So I think a 7 is appropriate. So yeah, I could see doing that on meads. It's just it depends on how many bottles they're asking for overall, I guess. Again, you got to assume you're going to win best of show, so yeah,
that's right.
You want to make sure you have a bottle for that too.
Peter Simmons asks, he's talking about carbonation, says it's a big problem in Australia. Pete, can you elaborate on this?
Well, because they're upside down, you see. So the bubbles are going the wrong way.
They're going anti-clockwise.
Yes.
Yeah. If there was, when you were talking about when the beers are at the table, under carbonation usually, the overcarbonated ones, you don't end up with much beer anyway. The undercarbonated ones, dependent on style, are a real issue. The question that did strike me, because it was a problem we had here last year, is that somebody wanted to enter cans into our New South Wales competition, and our rules only permitted bottles, and our rules are not the same as the US rules, and that posed quite a big issue for us, because what do you do about cans? How do you deal with best of show? So our competition organising body, the AABC, decided for this year, it would be containers of 500 mil, up to 500 mil. So,
Okay.
which allowed cans.
Right.
So what I was curious about is what did you think about entering a beer in a can? Because there's a lot of these fairly, not that I can afford it, but there are relatively cheap canning machines available now to homebrewers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, one of the issues with cans in competition was that people were, competitions were opening bottles. They would pour a portion of it for the judges, and then they'd recap it in case more was needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They needed to re-pour or something like that. And with cans, you don't have that ability to recap it. And so that was kind of one of the concerns. The other concern was, when you get in thousands of bottles, when you have, case boxes that are reusable to put all the bottles in, that's why they want certain sizes. So they all fit in there and the cases can be stacked, because sometimes you need to take room at a brewery or something like that. Yep. That's one of the issues. And then cans they have a different diameter, it becomes a whole nother issue. So that's one of the reasons that they don't want cans. But I think, people need to adjust. I don't see anything wrong with entering cans. And if somebody enters a can and it can't be reclosed, it's just going to have to sit open until, the end of that flight or whatever. And again, we send in...
Well, we have a slightly different practice in that we don't allow bottles to the table. Mm-hmm. All beers are decanted into jugs. And we have a countback system to determine tie breaks for equal scores to get to best of whatever or mini best of show. So really it's only going to be open to a mini best of show if you've got a big flight in a category. But yeah, I could see it being some issue, but we don't tend to recap bottles either. We don't have traditional best of show type second round judges because it's just not viable for us.
I judged in Australia once, and as I recall, all the scores were in metric too. It was very confusing. I had to keep converting from imperial to metric scores.
Yeah, it uses digits, binary digits.
They were completely different than here in the U.S. It was very confusing. Oh, that's all I can say. So if I offended anyone with my score sheets, that was the problem.
You would have had them in F, wouldn't you? And ours would have been in C.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Somebody asked me, Jamil, from all the international judging I've done, what was the worst category that I've judged in terms of interpreting American styles? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I'd have to say cream ale has been the worst category, by and large. Very often
bad here in the U.S. too.
Yeah, often very buttery, off flavors, heavy off flavors, sour, contaminated sometimes. It's almost like cream ale is that catch-all category they try to throw things in if they don't know where to enter it. Yeah, I haven't found much problem in international competitions in interpreting American styles so much. Although I do remember in Argentina, probably a decade ago, there was an IPA entered with these new hops, the new fruitier hops, the mosaics and so on. And some of the judges were calling that out of style because it wasn't citrusy or piney. And it's like, no, I had to say, no, this is an American IPA. These are the newer hops that are coming out. This is very much an American IPA. But I think people are more keyed into American styles. Certainly, I've judged hazy IPAs all over the world now.
Yeah, I'd say, for me, it just reminds me of the U.S. A few years ago, where there was just a lot of really bad sour beers. not done right.
Yeah.
And it was just like whatever tasted nasty, they entered it as a sour beer. It's like, no, don't enter that. Just throw it away. So I think for me that was probably it overall. But the international scene on judging and brewing and all that has really, just leapfrog, year after year, and just it didn't take us long for the rest of the world to, reach kind of the same level we were at, and in some cases, surpass what we were doing. So I think people were slow to take it up compared to the U.S. initially, but they very quickly made up for that. And so now I don't know that you really find. I guess you gotta be really doing like John and traveling the third world, and riding a donkey to the judging site to get the
elephants. We've done elephants.
Find something. I go places where there are planes, trains, and automobiles, and and I'm staying in a 4-star hotel. Those places, it's not an issue anymore, I think.
Right. Let's see. James asks, how readily available are U.S. hops in Australia? Is there any problems getting them as homebrew supplies there? Peter, is it hard to get U.S. hops in Australia?
Nope. We're very lucky. We local homebrew shops are well supplied. You get occasional hops that are this week's fad that are in short supply. What's the latest one? It's got a whole string of numbers on the end.
Okay. Idaho 7, Hill 23.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So but generally we get good range of malts from around the world and a good range of hops. Not an issue.
One thing I've seen in a couple of countries is there are brokers that are supplying hops. A lot of the hop growers and the hop consolidators here in the U.S. and in the Northwest, they are now starting to deal directly themselves with the international market, which has helped the international market. Prior to that, there's been some brokers that would buy whatever was the cheapest, crappiest version of Citra,
whatever's left over,
and resell that somewhere else. And it would be cheap, crappy Citra from 5 years ago that had been sat warm, and it was just really bad stuff. And I've had friends tell me, I'm like, well, what year Citra was it? And then they're like, year? It doesn't come with a year. It just says Citra. It's like they don't, they're just being given whatever's left over, because for a long time, these the hop growers didn't want to deal with an international customer, worry about getting paid, how does it get shipped, all the different issues, all the issues with agricultural shipments into a country. So I think that that's gotten better, but I think that was hurting a lot of people for a long time. And again, the places where John goes on a donkey to judge, I'm imagining they're probably not getting the best hops in the world. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't want to be negative towards any country, but I'm assuming the donkey does not have room, once it's carrying John, to carry much in the weight of hops.
That's right. Yeah. No, I think I've been very favorably impressed with American IPAs. Every competition I've judged in the last couple of years, whether I'm in Norway, Mexico, Sweden, Brazil, Argentina, Ecuador, Peru, all over.
These are all major countries with good infrastructure and the ability to get shipments in of fresh hops and such. Sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting how popular American beer styles are around the world. Hazy IPA, American IPA. but also how popular the traditional German styles are. I've had some outstanding double box, and some malty lagers and pilsners that it's like, wow, did Jamil brew this? Because they were that good. So yeah, it is. Though I wouldn't say that there's any real third world brewing countries these days. Everybody's pretty darn good.
I don't know. I've heard something about Djibouti and some of the things coming out of Djibouti. No?
Don't know where that would be.
Djibouti. No? I've offended all the people in Djibouti.
Yeah. Well, Matt asks, do you think competitive brewing made you a better brewer, Jamil?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Because you were really trying to, again, it's a difference between brewing for yourself and brewing to, impress others. And so trying to get, your beers dialed into, one, the highest quality of brewing.
Right.
And I always believe the competitions are supposed to be brewing competitions, not style competitions.
Okay.
But then also understanding everybody's, flavor profile, or their palates are different. Their understanding of the styles are different. And being able to tweak beers, in recipes to make them one way or another, easily, and and not have to brew it 5 times to get there. And towards the end, I was able to, just go, well, all right, here's the recipe for this. And, initially I was struggling with recipes and, understanding all the ingredients. Towards the end, it's like in my sleep, I could come up with a recipe that, would have exactly the right signature I was looking for. So it was very easy to make those changes for me. And so I only had to brew them once and just enter them.
Yeah.
So that helped a lot. And if I, and part of it was initially I didn't enter competitions to win anything. I wanted to know about my beer, whether it was good or not, because I was getting, people that were telling me this is the best beer in the world, and people telling me that the beer sucked horribly. I'm like, well, I could have gone, retreated inside and said, well, I like it. That's all that matters. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, I don't know that much about beer. I should, seek a impartial third party to do this. And then I heard about competition. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that. And then I got good feedback. I'm like, oh, okay. That was from the Maltose Falcons from the Mayfair. That was the first thing. I entered one beer, the chocolate hazelnut porter, and I got like 3rd place. And I'm like, this is great information. I'm like, I'm going to enter it again and see if I can make changes to the beer to do better. So I did, and I got 1st place the next year. And so I'm like, oh, this is the way to really, improve your brewing. They'll send you this information and you make changes. And so I started doing that more and more. And that's all I wanted, was not to win, but to be able to make better beer. And then I kind of got to a point where I was like, well, pretty much, I want to brew every style in the BJCP. And so I started doing that. And then I'm like, well, okay, I need another challenge. So I just wanted to keep brewing, and I wanted an excuse to keep brewing. And so then I was like, well, I need to get a 1st place in every style. And so I did that. And then I'm like, okay, I need to get a best of show in every style. And so I had these, goals I was working on that just, gave me an excuse to keep brewing beer and keep tweaking and keep trying to improve things. And so, because of that, there wasn't a time that I didn't learn something from every batch I brewed. So, yeah, I think competition brewing really did help me, really did make me a better brewer.
Yeah. Now, did your children, encourage you by saying, Dad, we won't respect you unless you take a best of show in every category?
Well, it's when they slap me, for getting just, for not getting best of show. That's when it really hurt. It hurt. It hurt me.
Yeah.
It hurt me in here. And
this is a silver, not a gold. Smack.
Actually, One of the greatest things for my kids was I think it was at the state fair competition one year. They were with me, and because we were just running around the state fair, and then we stopped our fair stuff to go by and sit in on the awards. And when the awards were called, they got to go up. I was like, go up and get it for Dad. Cool. And so they went up, and they loved it. They're just like, wow, people are applauding. They're taking pictures. I mean, they were real young at the time. And so they just thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
Very nice. Let's see. Here's a technical question. Any tips for brewing great English ales?
Oh, that is about the ingredients above all. So
malts.
You got to use British malts. You use high quality British malts. Nobody else in the world is capable of making those malts taste the same. There's brilliant maltsters everywhere in the world that know exactly what they're doing, and it's something about the where the malt is grown, where the grain's grown, how it's malted. It's just has this intensity of flavor that is unique to British malts and British beers. And then the yeast. You got to use the right yeast. You got to use the right malts. You got to use the right pitching rates, the right temperatures, and you do all that correctly, and you can produce a beer that tastes just like some of these British examples.
Nice. Scott asks, what are your thoughts on decoction mashing for competition? Does it give you an edge?
I never thought so.
Okay. I think Harold would agree with that. Down in San Diego Quaff.
Yeah. Michael Ferguson, he believes in
decoction. Yeah.
Decoction. Right.
Yeah.
The thing about even step mashing, I don't believe in step mashing. The thinning out of the proteins. I'm just with modern malts. I'm not sure it really helps. I've got friends that have done the blind things. I talk about it, doing just do 2 and then do a triangle test and tell if you can really tell the difference and if it's really the decoction or not. If you enjoy doing it, then you should. I wouldn't worry about it for competition though.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
50 point Doppelbock. Joe Formanek, 50 point Doppelbock.
Yeah.
There was no decoction involved. Not even a step mash.
Here's a good question on Berliner Weiss. He says, tips for brewing Berliner for comps. Usually it seems it needs to be a sour bomb and also lumped into other complex sours for metals. And he says, go decoctionists. I don't think so. I mean, my perception of Berliner, and I'm interested in hearing your opinion too, Jamil, is Berliner needs to be a clean, light sour. Not a complex sour, not a wild American sour. I think that people may have a misunderstanding about that.
Well, there's also, some use of Brett in some Berliners, but it's a subtle thing, and it's still, like you're saying, a fairly clean, not super clean, but clean,
light sour. It's a light style 1035,
and it's not an aggressive sour.
Yeah.
So. It's the same thing. We are Americans. So if a little salt is good, a lot of salt must be better. A little hops is good. A lot of hops is better. And a little sour is good. A lot of sour is better. And so, we tend to drive and it's like the earlier question Matt had about, doing something bigger in a competition. If you have, I think part of what the question is, it's like, well, in a sour category, when they've lumped Berliner Weisses with
American sours, or
with sours. A bunch of other sours, and you have these very sour beers you may get lost in a category like that. So it's, do you want to make it a little more sour in order to have it stand out? I'd be very careful on that, because especially the better the judging, the worse that works for you. The ideal thing is to always brew the best beer you can possibly brew. And just have it balanced and delicious, like John was saying earlier. That's your major strategy. But and it just is what it is, and you hope for good judging sometimes.
Yeah. Let's see what else we got here. Looking at recipes for winning IPAs for the past 2 years, it looks like hop additions and water chemistries are moving more and more towards omitting bittering hops and using more chlorides and sulfates. Do you think these changes are still within style, or are NEPAs changing our view of what West Coast IPA should be?
Well, so I think there's still, times when West Coast IPA in certain competitions where it's excruciatingly bitter and crisp and dry. I've always kind of steered away from that. And, the beers we do here at Heretic, I make them softer and not as biting. They're still really bitter, but not as biting. And that's just the way I prefer them. And, commercial brewing is a lot more about kind of what you prefer and what you think your customers will prefer. So we've avoided that. And so I would say, I could see people gravitating towards that water chemistry and that kind of,
higher chloride
hopping and higher chloride, less sulfates, and, making those changes. So I could see that happening. It's a moving target, styles and what their sense of them are.
Yeah. Good thought. Yeah, I think our preferences and judges' preferences of what they look for in terms of their favorite IPAs is shifting. A lot of people, as you say, are looking for a softer, juicier beer. But and again, if you have experienced judges who know the difference, and if the category is broad, is just IPA, they're going to judge each beer on its own merit. It doesn't matter if there's West Coast versus hazy in there. They'll pick the beer with the best balance as the meddler. But if you're entering a hazy and a West Coast IPA category, I think these days, there's a lot more experienced judges, and the beer won't do as well. It'll probably be knocked down, 5-10 points in that particular category.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been my experience the last couple of years.
All right, one last question.
Okay. Let's see what we got here. How do you feel your beers would compete in today's homebrew scene, Jamil?
I think the majority of them would do quite well. As I assume they're talking about
the beers you entered in competition 20 years ago,
like brewing classic styles.
Yeah,
those recipes.
Yeah,
the beers I brewed, 20 years ago, they probably would be getting a little stale by now. So those probably wouldn't do very well. But if I were to rebrew those same recipes today, I think they do very well, because a lot of it, was based on just clean flavors and, appropriate to style. If you brew well, they do really well. Mm-hmm. And people tell me they're winning awards with those recipes all the time. So
that's
I think that, clearly they're working. Part of it is a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if everybody's brewing those similar recipes and entering them, and then the judges are getting used to that, and it's like, okay, well, that's what, we've kind of helped define the style here. So I think that would help. And the good thing is, people worry about that, and they go, well, how is that, the brewing competition? Well, it's a brewing competition because it's about the brewing. It's not about the recipe. It's, if everybody brewed the same recipe, it's still a brewing competition. Mm-hmm. That's the difference between taking it's like you can take 100 chefs, all give them exactly the same ingredients and recipe, and those 100 dishes would all taste different. Some of them would be closer together as to what was intended and be really good, and some would be really horrible, and some would be, and some would really stand out as just fantastic. So, that I think, is part of it. So, yeah, I think they do quite well. And then there's some newer styles that commercially we're already doing. So I think what I'd like to do is do a new version of Brewing Classic Styles, or a new recipe book, and update it with all my current thinking and new recipes, and hitting all the new styles. I'd love to.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. This was a blast. I really enjoyed this. Spending time with everybody, and you guys are. I'll tell you this also. This CIA, this Cane Island Ailers, they are one of the best behaved as far as like microphones and stuff like that. The 4 or 5 meetings I've been in, they really do a great job of not trotting over each other and being respectful, but still having fun and interchanging, and it's a pretty good sized crowd. So I've just been very impressed with them. So thank you, first off, for letting me in to your first meeting, and now that you haven't been able to get rid of me for 5 weeks, I'm like a cockroach. I ain't going nowhere. Like I told you guys this before, and so thanks for doing that. And this is like John and I's first Zoom Brew Strong episode.
Hopefully we'll do more.
Yeah, we want to see. Maybe we'll make a regular habit of this, because this has been a lot of fun. And please, everybody that's listening, please support our sponsors, BlickmanEngineering.com. He really has been paying for the show for a good 13 plus years, faithfully, and has never, not paid for it so that you all could listen. So I think it deserves, at the very least, a thank you email saying, thank you, because and anybody who's listening, those archives are there for free for, that's a ton of stuff. It's like 1,000 hours worth of stuff at this point. So really, really deserves our thank you. And yes, somebody says he makes some good equipment. Absolutely he does. And he's just a nice guy that wants to support brewing in general. So, and if you ever see him at the conference, if we ever have a conference in person again, make sure to say hi to him. And if you got questions for Brew Strong, you can email us at brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com. Just preface it with question and all that, and we won't answer them by email, but we will answer them on the air eventually. We got through quite a few of them over the years. And we'll do that. All right. So, Brew Strong, everybody.
Brew Strong. Take care.